Thank you guys for having me. This is actually, well, first of all, round of applause for Darren. His awesome job. Like, very cool job. So this is actually my first talk, or second talk actually, since leaving Apple. The first one was like, it happened by happenstance. I was in Buenos Aires. I was working with a developer for years before that who asked me randomly if I could come speak. It was a very small audience. This is much bigger. And it was like, I don't know if there was like, could have been like a language barrier. I don't know if I was any good. But they were really nice. They smiled and nodded. So if you guys aren't following me, please just smile and nod. It'll make me feel much better. Actually, kind of the way this happened, Jesse and I have a lot of like the similar network of friends. And when I left Apple, she reached out and said, "Hey, would you mind speaking at Layers?" And I had never been to Layers because it's the same week as WWDC every year, and I've been like across the street, or well, in San Francisco. And I said, "Of course." And then, we talked about like what we would talk about and what might be helpful for folks. And we landed on kind of the perfect iOS 12 launch. So this is kind of, the concept behind this is to try to give you like a guideline for like the summer. What you should be focused on. I'm assuming there are a lot of developers in here. How many developers do we have? Developers? All right, cool. Great. And how many designers? Great, all right. How many technologists? Good, because I still don't know what technologist actually means. So anyway, we were talking about this concept, and then and so we're on the phone, and we're like, okay, we can do this, like how to launch a great iOS 12 app. And then she's like, yeah, we can do it like, you can do it like the Tuesday morning after WWDC. And I'm like, less than 24 hours after the keynote to do a presentation about the keynote. And then I just like disappeared on the thread and didn't respond for like 2 weeks. So no, and actually a couple of weeks later, I get an email that went out to all the speakers, and I was like the first speaker on the list. Well played, Jesse. Very, very well played. So anyway, what we're going to talk about today is what, kind of from my experience at Apple, of what would be like a guideline for the summer and how to create like the perfect iOS 12 launch. And kind of to lay the groundwork, I don't think I need too much for this audience, but I'll do it anyway. There's two times of the year that are like super important for like the developer community and for Apple as a whole. One is like, yesterday and this week, which is like the announcement of all the new software. And then the second is like when that software launches and when the new iPhone launches in the fall, right? And in between there's a couple of months where Apple is and developers are super laser focused on on integrating these new technologies, and Apple in particular evangelizing these new technologies so that when the new OS launches in the fall with the hardware, that there's a ton of content out there for users, right? Because that's kind of the differentiating factor on the for iOS as a whole. Groundwork, right? And iPhone is still like 80% revenue. Okay, so the idea here is to figure out how to kind of ride that Apple marketing wave, or what's the best way to ride that wave, so you guys can hopefully have a successful launch. If you guys are developing anything that hasn't launched yet and the timing kind of lines up right to be around the fall, or if you have any updates coming for your apps, for you to be able to kind of get free marketing and hopefully be able to fund your next project or whatever. Okay, cool. So how do you do that? So the first step would be to find, and that's kind of to find out what technologies are going to be important to Apple and really the world, right? Because once this stuff comes out, and even if you look at any of the blogs right now, it's like all eyes on WWDC, what's happening, what's going on, and it'll be the same in the fall. And so how do you do that? Let's take a trip back to WWDC 2015. And I just went back a couple of years. This literally has happened probably, this is my first WWDC that I'm missing with for like the last 9 years. And I'll probably try to like sneak in across the street just to say like I was inside. But this has happened for like, since I've been at Apple, is like Craig will come on stage and he'll say, iOS 9 in this case there's like 2,000 new APIs, and we've got a really great like new OS and new release for you guys. And then like after he's done with this presentation, he'll just talk about like 12 or 10. And these are the ones you guys should focus on, right? Like the subset of all those technologies that they actually spend time talking about. And so these are the ones for 2015, and a couple of months later when the OS launches, you'll see something like this, right? You'll see best games or best apps for iOS 9, and you'll see like front and center these games and apps that are featured because they have some type of one of those technologies integrated in them. And so, and this is again something that happens pretty much every year. 2016, iOS 10. 3,000 new APIs, like 5 that we're focused on. And again, 2017, and then here they are featured with the iMessage App Store. 2017, want to be a dead horse. And notice that Craig has like every color, every tone of blue casual button up. And 2011, again, ARKit. And you look on the store, and like even now, there's still sections of on this store that's just focused on ARKit. And so, great. So what happened yesterday? Anyone have a wild guess? Okay, here we go. There's 12 technologies that were kind of singled out and focused on, right? We've got the performance aspect, ARKit 2, photo improvements, Siri improvements, shortcuts, all the rest of the stuff. And so as developers, if you're developing anything for currently or for that's going to be launching anytime near the fall or even after the fall, I would focus on one of these to try to integrate, because that way you can kind of get the attention from Apple. Or even, again, like any blogs and stuff like that. So now that you know like which ones they're focused on, so there's 12, you can look at that list again, and we'll look at it again right now. But like identify, right? That means like this list, but you need to actually identify which features make sense for your app and your product. You don't want to just like frivolously integrate like shortcuts or ARKit if you have like a calendar app. It doesn't make sense. So what you need to do with your team is figure out which one of these might make sense for you. So obviously for a game like Pokemon Go, they might be using like the new features in ARKit. For something like Sonos, you might be using Siri shortcuts so that when you come into your house, you can just say something to Siri and it plays music from your speaker in your bedroom instead of having to actually do it manually. If you're like a sticker app, you might want to use kind of the new features of the filters in iMessage apps, or in iMessage where you can kind of overlay stickers over your photos and send it to friends. And for like the Ray-Ban app, like maybe the filter feature in FaceTime now is something that might be interesting for you. So you have to figure out what makes sense for your product. And like I think a point to make here is that you want to actually there's things that like obviously make sense. I think these things hopefully make sense. But like there's also things that I think there's something to be said about spending maybe a week or two with your team and figuring out like maybe there's some things that are kind of a bit more experimental that might actually turn into something really cool. Because I think those experiences are like those not so obvious integrations and experiences tend to be the stuff that the things that really kind of blow people away. And those don't come just kind of randomly, right? It takes thought and time and effort, but they can turn out to be really cool. And maybe they don't, right? Maybe you just scrap it right away after you've played with it a little bit. But yeah, so identify, just making sure that you find something that makes sense for your product. The next one is to integrate, obviously. So one thing, and the thing I think that we want to talk about here is that, like, whether you're integrating in, Xcode in Swift or any of the third-party engines, like, to do that stuff like now, right? There is huge value in doing this stuff earlier on because because you're going to get familiar with the features and the APIs and all that stuff. You get to iron out bugs early, or you get to maybe highlight bugs to Apple that are that they're not totally aware of, or fringe cases that could be fixed before you launch. And if you start doing that like in the midsummer, you won't have enough time to kind of make sure you're doing it that it turns out the way you'd like it to turn out. But then also, like, when I worked at Apple, we would have we have a lot of developers. I know probably a lot of you guys. Are there any Unity developers? Unity? Oh, not too much. Okay, so like we had a lot of developers that were on Unity or other third-party engines that were kind of felt like they were like slowed down by the integrating with or trying to. They were slowed down because Unity wasn't integrating stuff quickly, which I don't think is obviously not the case for most of you guys. But for those who are on any of the third-party engines, like doing this stuff early, you can kind of push these guys to integrate things quicker and faster. And if they get people like beating on the pavement and with pitchforks and stuff, they'll change things. We've seen that happen before. But integrating early also. The value in that too, which I think is a lot of people kind of forget. It's obvious, I think, but people forget is that you're typically, a lot of people, they leave WWDC, they say, oh, there's some cool features, and they go home and everyone has like full-time jobs or like a release schedule that they have, and so some of this stuff gets put to the back burner. So when I was at Apple, we would have after every WWDC, we'd come back into the office on Monday, and we'd have an exec that would be like, all right, what are the cool ARKit apps that people are thinking about? And we're like, what? It's like Monday after, no one's integrated anything yet, right? But we'd inevitably come up with something that we talked to someone about and heard about. And once you get, and those guys would get rolled up to our execs or management. And those, once you're on a list, for tracking for internally for fall launches, you're on that list for the entire summer and the people will be checking in with you and thinking about and wanting to get updates and stuff like that. And it's much harder when you're closer to launch, when you're closer, when we get to August and there's a bunch of people that have integrated and trying to get through the noise. It's much more difficult than if you even if you conceptualize something, you talk to someone at Apple that you're talking to, getting it out, getting that out there early it's super helpful, it's super valuable, even if it's just conceptual. So that's integrate. And this is kind of from integrate. It's just share it. I think there's a culture sometimes in Silicon Valley of being super protective and secretive about what we're working on, and to the point of sometimes paranoia. But I think it's super valuable to share. Obviously there's you don't want to share your code, but you want to make sure you're sharing with your users or a group of users. If you're lucky enough to have a rep at Apple, share it with those folks, even if it's conceptual. You're okay, we have this concept for ARKit 2 that we're going to be working on the next couple of weeks. If you share it out to people, share on the web and share on Twitter, right, or social media. And I think what that allows you to do is get a lot of feedback, some early attention. But then also another little secret is last year when we announced ARKit, we so there's a thing where after we announce something, like as we know, Apple is super focused on like the app space, that app world. Like if you think about the amount of revenue that both iPhone and iPad brings in, and then the App Store brings in, like iOS is like, it obviously is the thing. I don't need to stress that much, but which means like literally every team is focused on something, like some aspect of what is announced at WWDC, whether it's like the education team and they're doing stuff with ARKit in classroom, or the retail team, or the Marcom team, or right, like every single team is focused on that. So when we announce something, like there's a lot of people internally that are kind of trolling the internet for things that are out there that's interesting. So last year when we announced ARKit, obviously it's a big new thing. And like when people were ARKit obviously was obviously a pretty robust feature, but folks were looking for stuff, and that I don't know if you guys remember that Made for ARKit website that would like feature different ARKit experiences. You guys will be surprised like how much people are like all over that website every day internally, and a lot of those experiences ended up turning into feature opportunities on launch day, and that's just because like it was out there into the ether, and people like everyone's looking for stuff. So share, even if you don't share with your users, share with Apple, and if you don't have a connection with Apple somehow. Share on the internet, like share on your personal blog, share on your social media. There's a potential for that to get picked up somewhere. And then obviously refine. I think we're probably all familiar with like refining our products, like a prototype concept, whatever, and really that means like test, right? Test and test a lot. Because you want to make sure that like once you're getting close to launch, or once you're getting some attention, you're getting some people are reaching out to you about different things, and you're ready to actually share like share what you're working on, like closer to launch. You want to make sure that it's working well, and like I think it's really important to like the reason why I like made this like obnoxious slide is because. I've had some experiences with developers that I've worked with who have like tested like on like beta 2, right? And it like works okay, and then they get tied up doing other stuff, and then by the time beta 10 comes out, or even the GM or closer to the GM they're like test again, and something has changed, some like tiny thing has changed that just like screws up their entire like what they're planning. So like you want to make sure you're testing on every beta as it comes out, even if it's just a quick sanity check, because you want to make sure that you're not like, you don't prepare for this like amazing launch and then have to like scrap it because you might not have had time to do the testing, right? Or thorough testing. And then prep. So after you've gone through this the summer, and you're like getting closer to launch, you're about 6 weeks out. 6 weeks, like I guess from all the rumor sites, because we don't ever really know when it's launching until a week before, but that's not really true. So like you've got this really cool game that you've built out, and that's using like these really cool technology, but then you have to like prep the launch, right? You need to like make sure you have art assets, make sure you have stuff for social media, maybe GIFs out, maybe make sure you're looking at your App Store page and that you're actually like updating it for the launch, right? You want it to reflect what the stuff that you're doing, and the description and the screenshots, that type of stuff. And then also like if you have like email list, like send it out. Say, hey, we're launching this next week, or this is a really cool feature you guys that we've been working on, or something like that. Doing PR, reaching out to all the like a lot of times I think people take for granted like what these things can do for you. I think there's some cases where you might do like all of these things and you only get picked up in one, like for one, but that one could like feed into the other ones. Or maybe they all get picked up a little bit, they get a little traction, and it creates a snowball effect. I think like this stuff is the stuff that you can do for free, right? To like support your launch. So like, again, and don't take this stuff for granted. Make sure you're doing this. And this App Store promo, there is a, actually, I'll get it right now. There is, if you guys aren't aware, there's a link on the developer portal that you can actually submit like your stories. So I think everyone's pretty aware of like the change of the App Store that happened last year. Everyone knows that. But like those stories, you can actually pitch stories to Apple about like what you're doing, what's unique about your team, what's unique about your app, what's unique about like your story, right? And you can pitch that stuff to Apple, and there's and you can send them your like social media assets, you can send them your marketing plans, all that stuff. And like there's someone that actually looks at that stuff. So this website, the link is developer.apple.com/contact/app store/promote/. And you guys can get with me after. I can just like send it to you or email it, whatever. But like that is super cool. Like that has never, ever been done. Like the App Store turns like 10 in a couple months, and like it took 9 years for this stuff to happen, for people to actually like have like a channel into Apple and to like pitch the stuff that they think is cool. And working there last year for like a couple of months after this launch, they actually do look at that stuff, and they actually have taken stories and built stuff based on it. So like as you're developing, even now, like some of the stuff that's really cool for the Apple folks is like the behind the scenes things. So like as you're developing your concept for iOS 12, keep all your like art assets, keep all your concept drawings, all that stuff, because if they like your app, that's another channel to potentially get some more attention on your stuff. Just sending that over to Apple and saying, hey, look, this is what we did this summer, and this is these are the challenges we went through, but it turned out great, right? So all this stuff goes into like prepping your launch after you've actually developed it. And then you're done. You launch, right? And you have like, you're on the store in iOS 12, and what you want to do is for this, you want to just make sure that you're following like the cadence of betas as they start coming out like quicker and quicker. That's like a sign of like when the GM is going to launch. Make sure when the GM is released, you have you submit right away, or you test and submit right away. After you submit, you'll be able to. Like I would always suggest submitting as soon as you can, because there always may be some funky stuff with app review, or not always, but there could be. So if you get kicked back, you want to be able to like make whatever fix to your metadata or whatever screenshots and resubmit right away and still make the launch. So always submit that as soon as possible. And then like you launch and you've done everything well, and hopefully you get a lot of attention on the store and you make millions and millions of dollars, and then we can, so anyway, but that's it. Like, I hope it was helpful. It's, I guess, a bit of a different talk for this type of audience, but I hope that it was a bit helpful for you guys, and some of the stuff you can take away. If you guys have any questions, you guys can come ask me afterwards. You can also contact me on my site. If you don't run into me, it has all my contact information on there. But thank you for the time, and again, I hope it was helpful.